At last, folks, we are here. The final video for this, or at least my first phase of going through all the mixes. Can't believe I made it this far without going bonkers. So, first one for today. Such a wonderful name. Yevgeniy Stupak from Sanctuary Recordings. It wasn't as hard as I thought. The first thing I notice is between the intro and now this big part, you may want to watch out for your EQ balance. I'm not quite awake yet. The lo-fi kick and snare have a lot of lower mid-range reverb just going on, but then the big part sounds rather scooped. And there you get a very different general EQ balance, and that makes it feel quite disconnected. The bass feels a bit foggy in the lower range. It could use a bit more of a definition around 100 Hz, and I'm pretty sure if you do that, then the kick would also need a bit more of a low-end thump. So you may want to watch out that you don't filter it too much down there. The vocals need to come up a little bit. Here you notice that the drums and the bass are very much in the foreground, but the vocals are very much in the background. I think the rhythm guitars could also come down just a little bit, because they again have this more scooped vibe, which is not a bad thing here. It still works fine, but it can easily make the drums or push the drums a little bit further back, because the drums don't have as much of a higher range crack and click going on. So just lowering the volumes of the rhythm guitars, I think, will help that out to give them a bit more of a balanced presence. Next one is by Viscor. You couldn't have picked a better picture than that? Oh, buddy. This is a very, very solid mix. The low end is spot on. The whole balance is pretty much spot on, frequency-wise and volume-wise. Okay, here perhaps the secondary guitars could come up a little bit. I'm still gonna let that go through, but we'll see then in the second verse if those secondary guitars are not perhaps too low in volume. Yeah, that second layer of rhythm guitars, I'm not quite sure yet. They are a little bit low in volume, and especially here, it seems like they are monoed. Which presents a little bit of a problem for you, because now you have the bass with all its mid-range, the clean guitar, the vocals, and these rhythm guitars all in the center. Could be a bit problematic. If you would pan these second rhythm guitars a bit to the left and right, you will notice your mid-range will open up. Yeah, well, this is otherwise a pretty good mix. Next one is by Pegg. Okay, so far this is a pretty good mix. I do notice though in the bass guitar there's again a little bit much of that honky mid-range, around 400-500 hertz. I don't really want to say it's problematic at this point, but I just notice it stands out quite a bit. So we'll go on. The vocals seem quite heavily compressed. You again hear that hard attack whenever his line starts. And they also seem a little bit muffled, like there's too much lower mid-range. And with the bass guitar and the rhythm guitars already sounding the way they are, you may want to watch out that the vocals don't even still add to that lower mid-range, which could potentially muddy stuff up. I think the toms need some work. They are barely audible at times in the fills. They definitely need to come up in volume, but that's about all I can say about them at this point. That solo needs to come up in volume too. That lower mid-range on the vocals actually works pretty good for his higher singing register, because it makes sure that his voice still sounds rich and powerful, but then for his lower register it adds too much mud down there. So what you could do is use a dynamic EQ to work on that lower mid-range, so it stays a bit higher in volume on his higher register, but then the EQ ducks down that region for his lower register. TDR Nova, a free dynamic EQ. Trust me, it will be a very powerful tool in your plugin arsenal. Next one is by Donald Ho. This is one of the few times where I need to say the vocals need to come down in volume a little bit, and the bass guitar needs a bit of volume balancing and EQ balancing going on. It needs to come down in volume. That whole mid-range and the pick attack is punching through a little bit too much, so it feels a bit disconnected from the rest of the mix, and there's a bit much of that lower mid-range again going on that sounds a bit honky and not very pleasant. But then the low range around 100 Hz is a bit weak, so that needs to come up to really fill up the low end of the mix. Yeah, you notice the rhythm guitars and the bass guitar, they feel very, very different. Like they don't really belong to the same band. The rhythm guitars have, again, this more scooped and bright, scratchy sound with a lot of distortion going on, but then the bass is very much clean and has more of that lower mid-range going on. It's not as scooped, so the tones don't really work well together, I kind of want to say. How did I get here? Why could I have let these bars be placed up? Kind of sounds like you just kept the DI of the bass and perhaps gave it some compression and perhaps a little bit of EQ. Of course you can do that, but giving the bass a little bit of actual bass tone with bass amp simulation and cap simulation, it will feel so much livelier. And a bass amp simulation also helps to add some saturation to the tone and a bit of grit and a bit of distortion, which helps to fill up the whole spectrum of the bass track. Yeah, perhaps the solo can also come up in the B or so, and that's about it. Next one is by Anthony Ellis, but I just checked. He sent me 3 mails, and you just shared the file with me. You shared the folder of Dropbox with me, something around those lines. But again, I need the stream and not a download or folder sharing. That's too much fiddling. It's time wasting. I mean, I have almost 200 entries to go through here. I can't waste time on fiddling with stuff like this. That's why I said just a stream. I want to click it, bam, it's there. No fiddling around. So for the next time, if you're not sure about the site you want to use, if it really does what you need it to do, just use SoundCloud. Just make an account, it's free, and it will work. So, I'm sorry, Anthony, but I'm not able to listen to your mix. Next one is by Logan Burstead. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I reviewed yours last video. And this one says it's a resubmission. Dude. No. This is a contest, okay? There are no second tries, or you can't just send me a couple of mixes and then say, hey, here, pick the best one. Not gonna do that. I already reviewed yours, so that's that. That means next one is by Lily Arciniega. Okay, it's a pretty solid mix. It all works pretty well. I just say the snare could use a bit more top range crack, so because right now it feels a little bit muffled, and the vocals could come up a little bit in volume. But not much really, perhaps just a dB or so. It's really just a fine tweak. Frequency-wise, they sit very well in the mix, and they don't really fight with anything else for some space. I feel the rhythm guitars could perhaps use a little bit more presence around 3K. That was some pretty cool effects you added there towards the end. Yeah, this is overall pretty solid mix. It's just really the snare that could use a little bit more high-end crack. And also the bass guitar sounded like you just kept the clean DI and with some compression and perhaps some slight EQ. Again, you can do that, but it would be more interesting if you gave it an actual bass amp tone and stuff like that. Then again, there are not a lot of bass amp simulations out there, but we're gonna get to that in another video. Next one is by Jeff Stiles. Okay, overall there are no problems with the mix. The low end sounds very nice, but it does need some work. For example, the rhythm guitars I think could come up in volume a little bit. Something about the drums. I want to say the drums sound a little bit too muffled, but I'm gonna have to listen a little bit more. Yeah, you notice the vocals are very much upfront and present, but it's to the point that everything else feels pushed towards the back. So you could help that by raising the overheads of volume just a little bit, giving the kick a bit more high-end click, and giving the snare a bit more high-mid crack. Just to kind of even out the presence in that mid-range and top range for all the tracks. And if you do that, I suspect the rhythm guitars would also need to get raised a little bit more in volume, or again the top mid-range perhaps needs a bit of a boost to make them also sit in the mix and cut through nicely. Shamed into serving the masses disease. Oh, we're getting loose, then we will be completely out of. How did I? Whoa! Okay, I'm not sure about the solo being panned more toward the right. I mean, there's nothing really on the same level of presence to counteract that on the left side. You may think we have the hi-hat on the left side, and then, okay, we pan the solo a bit to the right side to even out the stereo field, but they have very different levels of a presence going on. You want to have the solo up front, and to keep them up front, just keep them centered. It's again also same idea with vocals and solo. You want the solo to kind of take the same place as the vocals. So, and you keep vocals centered. Now panning the solo to the right, it kind of feels awkward. And also with the hi-hat on the left, people won't listen to that. The solo is up front, it's what's most present now, the hi-hat is just keeping the groove going. And we reached the last entry. Now, isn't that something? And this is by... Is it Eugene? I think Eugene is usually spelled with a U behind the E at the beginning, but this is spelled with a V. And I'm not sure if that's supposed to be the trendy thing that people do nowadays, replacing a U for a V, or if that is really how your name is spelled. So I'm just gonna stick with Eugene Jr. Okay, what I noticed is the low end of the bass is a bit too strong here. It's kind of masking the lower range of the kick, and it's kind of overpowering the mix as a whole a little bit.
I'm running out of breath. I'm running in. The lioness is here. The disease unstoppable. Just wait. The time is coming soon for us to break.
Okay, the solo could come up in volume a little bit, and there's something about the top range of the overhead. The vocals could come up in volume at times, so you may want to work on your volume automation. Yeah, there is something going on with the top range on the overheads. If you also put a steep filter somewhere around there, then leave it. Just keep the top range open. But this also kind of sounds like it could be due to file compression, but I can't quite put my finger on it. No, and I'm not going to try to put my finger on it. So, it's still a pretty solid mix. Just one or the other tweak, and you are good to go. And that is it. So one other guy sent me his mix again because his Dropbox didn't work, but a deadline is a deadline. You should have made sure it works before the deadline. So there are no do-overs. Awesome. So now I have 44 mixes left over that I thought were worthy of a second, more serious listen. And yeah. That's good. I was kind of fearing I would be left with way more, but no, 45 or 44, that is still manageable. It's just one page, and then I will get through those perhaps tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. Perhaps I even start today, who knows. All depends on my awakeness. So, but I hope by the end of the week I can announce the winner. If not, definitely next week. Then you look forward to that. And when I announce the winner, I will also talk about some mixing tips, and I'll sum up some of the problems a lot of the mixes had, or some common problems. So that should perhaps also help you in your further endeavor to develop your mixing skills. Okay, then I shall see you next time.